This is a message to all Sri Lankans. Piracy is bad. Or is it?
Well, piracy is, I think, from an intellectual property point of view, using, and I'm being very simple, I'm not giving technical definitions. From an intellectual property point of view, it's using something that's not yours without permission or payment. I think that's the easiest way I can break it down for you. You know that most of our services, not the products, services that you see, they're based on this concept of intellectual property and how you have ownership of that. And then when you have ownership, it becomes tradable. And that's literally how this economy is made. And you have platforms, software, streaming, all of these stuff that sort of comes under this umbrella. And we can use literally.
When talking about media piracy in Sri Lanka, one could argue that it has become a necessity today, right? And people around the world use it to read books, watch movies and TV series, and download software as well. But why do people say that it's bad? Well, today we are going to address those issues. But piracy as a whole is a bit of a big topic, and we're not going to address all of that in one video. So we are going to focus on one of the more larger forms of piracy in Sri Lanka today. A form of piracy encoded in my DNA, in your DNA maybe, and the DNA of every adult, teen and child on this island. A form of storytelling that has captured the hearts and minds of every Sri Lankan who has had access to a PC. Be But first, let's take a look at the history of media piracy in Sri Lanka.
So I'll give you my experience. We used to record songs off radio stations. So there was a complicated, because we didn't have the song, literally. And the only way you could hear a song, and let's say it's a new track, and the only way you could hear it is through a radio station, and sometimes that too, because let's say you request for it, because there were request things like request shows. So you knew a song and you requested for it, and there are enough and more times we take the cassette, the basically you're listening to the radio station, and while doing that you can press play, and that particular song will get recorded, and there's enough and more times people botch that up. It was a comprehensively difficult exercise. Let me just tell you one thing, and I'll take it a step back even to know a song. And this is something I tell my students. I mean, if you look at now, if you hear a song that's unfamiliar to you, Ishada, what do? You take out an app and you just within seconds you know what that is. I'll tell you a story. Digital Love by Daft Punk. I first heard that song through a Nokia ad. The SoftLogic was the Nokia sponsor and Nokia dealer in Sri Lanka. And I saw that ad and I was hooked on that song. Now, you have to imagine, internet was not as mature as it was today. I did not know what that song is. So I waited for a very long time just looking for that song. What was that song? Until accidentally I came across it years later in YouTube, or the early version of YouTube. And even then I couldn't find the name. And you have to understand, again, this went on for a couple of months till I actually found the name, Digital Love Daft Punk. Then I had to request it from a radio station and went on to record the song. So you have to understand now, a song I liked, for me to get that, it was a years-long process. Unlike now, where we have streaming services and it's a matter of seconds where it's on your device. So that's the story. I mean, there's a lot there about having access to the content, knowing about the content, not having probably the economic opportunities or the digital libraries that we used to have those days to get it without a problem, to walk into a CD store and even ask. I mean, you have to understand, most of the record bars, as we used to call it, had pirated songs. Or you used to tell them, okay, I need this song, and they'll take about a week or 2 weeks, and they'll record that song for you on a tape, and you have to buy them the cassette. So that's how literally this whole ecosystem, I would say, I have seen start. I'm sure it's a, if you talk to people a little more mature to me, you will get even more examples. But this is how literally I saw when I was growing up, piracy and entertainment and media intersect.
First off, when I was a fourth grader, I assembled my first PC, a Cortador, and when that happened, um, back then, video game piracy on itself wasn't like a thing. We just called it downloading, or we just called it sharing, because back then we used to run a little gang of bicycle riding friends, right? What we would do is we would crash to someone's place and then gaze at this stash of CDs, random banana CDs, Imation CDs, whatever, which are unlabeled, uncurated, and we would throw our hands in the pocket and grab a bunch of our own CDs, throw it into the pile, and grab some of theirs, and then leave. It's kind of like a lucky dip, but for piracy and media. And yeah, that was it. There was no moral compass, no whatever. We were kids and we were having fun. That was about it. But as we grow up, we learned about why it's not good. It's intellectual property and stuff like that. Apart from that, specifically the situation in Sri Lanka, there was no restraint. There was no one to tell you shouldn't download. There was no advertisement with you wouldn't download a car, would you? It wasn't there in Sri Lanka, right? Plain as it is, right? So I think it's a question of restraint rather than morality, or more of awareness rather than anything else.
This is a CD cafe where you would go to buy CDs or DVDs, but these aren't actually legal because most of these CDs are illegal copies, and in the glorious 2000s this was all the rage. The owners would break down the original, copy it, and then sell it to the public, which is us. I mean, it is a pretty solid business plan if you ask me. But here's what's interesting. This practice was so common in the Sri Lankan mindset that we didn't even realize that it was illegal.
If you remember, I'm not going to name the store, but there are so many well-known and trusted stores for having good copies of movies written onto DVDs, right? Or video games written on DVDs. None of them are legitimate. We are not paying any kind of a revenue to the companies, the AAA companies or whatever. It's literally some dude putting the ISO, the image, disk image file of the video game that has been pirated, along with a mounting software, something like, if I remember correctly, I used to use something called Alcohol 120 and Daemon Tools and WinRAR and stuff like that. A copy of that software onto a DVD and then giving us a text file how to do it.
Back in the day, the internet was a lot more, how do I put it, free. Yeah, like the Pirate Bay was a thing. It was, everybody knew about it, and there were so many forums, there were so many websites that you can just find these stuff to download. It doesn't even have to be a torrent. You can just download a file off of the internet, and there wasn't much of a panic about viruses or this or that, and people were more daring, I'd say.
So, we can establish a few things. One, media piracy has been a thing in Sri Lanka for quite a while now. And two, it is both the product of Sri Lanka's economical woes and its people not being even remotely familiar with legitimate forms of purchasing media. But can it be actually justified?
Okay, first thing is convenience. Second thing is the most important thing. Some things that I pirate personally could not be otherwise attained. Like, legitimately, they are not archived, they're not protected, they're not available. They're just there rotting in some collector's, archive or whatever. But fortunately for pirates, it's really easy. I'll give you a very simple example. How, Mr. Ishada, how hard would it be for you to to legitimately watch the entirety of the classic SpongeBob series. It would be really hard. You'd have to subscribe to like 4 streaming services, and still you will be censor locked, reach unlocked from around a dozen of episodes. So it's really hard. For a pirate, it's a matter of typing something and letting it download overnight, and then the next day he has the entirety of the catalog to himself, to themselves. So, so that availability, the availability and the preservation of media is one of the reasons.
So is it just about access to and preserving lost or hard to find media?
Cost, one thing, because as much as, even though I'm working now, money is still money. Like, I don't have an unlimited amount of it, and I got to pick and choose. Like, I'm okay with this, I'm okay with that. And yes, multiplayer experiences does push me towards buying a game.
Sometimes the pricing that you have globally may not be acceptable in this part of the world. So actually, we have sort of, you have to dissect why people go into piracy. One is price, because let's say you can't pay $100, but maybe you can pay $5 or $10. So it's about understanding market dynamics, because maybe a person in the US can pay $50, $60, $70, whereas someone from this part of the world, maybe they can pay 5, but they're willing to pay sometimes. So I think I have mediated conversations like that, where we have strongly lobbied organizations. Listen, certain things make it affordable for this part of the world.
But what was your first experience with a video game? Was it moving your armies and uncovering the map in Age of Empires? Or driving through the streets of Need for Speed? Maybe it was Tomb Raider, or maybe something even older. For me, it was VCOP 2, a game where I had to just point and click at bad guys. It was on this shiny all-white PC that my parents had brought me, and it was installed on it. And to me, it was the best thing that was ever created, and I've been hooked on video games ever since. From titles like Need for Speed Hot Pursuit to an Age of Empires to and Delta Force to games like Kingdom Come Deliverance, Marvel Rivals, and Space Marine 2. But the point is that I've grown up with video games, and the industry has grown and evolved along with me as well. So, what's the gaming industry like now?
Now, currently, I feel like everything is digitized, and when you buy a game, you don't get a game, you get a license that could be revoked at any time that the company decides, and you get a little ticket to play the game, and that has what video game purchasing video game revenue has become nowadays, and that's pretty sad. But in contrast, I feel like in restraint and discipline and respecting someone's earning and stuff like that, I feel like we as a country, even as youth, as a generation, we have grown, we are more aware. And yes, that's my opinion.
So, our game is better? Well,
Currently, the DRM software they couple up with video games just to check the legitimacy of the purchase is hindering the frames. It's hindering the performance of the game. It's hindering the experience that the person is getting from the game.
A lot of the games that are coming out nowadays are more designed by committee, let's just say. And of course, the costs of making games has gone up significantly, because when it comes to PC gaming, when it comes to like Xbox, PlayStation, those sorts of games, like there's always been this push towards hyper realistic graphics and like more assets, and like I've dabbled a bit into game design, a little bit, and making assets isn't easy. It really isn't easy. And making these hyper realistic graphics, making all these details, it's super time consuming. But that is the direction that a lot of games are pushing towards, and I think that is detrimental to I do think that is detrimental, because we're going to only get so much when it comes to realism.
but apart from fueling the pirate industry in Sri Lanka, video games have also fueled something else: my imagination. Personally, I don't think that I would ever get into the video game industry if I didn't play a pirated video game as a kid. I would not be invested in franchises like Age of Empires, Tekken, or GTA and be willing to pay for them. I would be a totally different person. But would you? To answer this, I conducted my own research. By using the magic known as Google Forms, I asked 50 people in the Western Province area about their opinions on video game piracy. When asked if they wouldn't be invested in media today if they hadn't been exposed to pirated content at an earlier stage in life, while most answered maybe, a significant portion of people said that they would not. But what does that mean? Well, according to my research, two things. One, because of piracy, people are invested in the video game industry and are actively investing in it. Take a look at this chart. When asking about the price of video games, it's not a total black and white answer. In fact, it shows that people are spending money on games, but they consider the quality of the game beforehand.
The reason that I purchased Space Marine was the price was way cheaper than Baldur's Gate at the time. It's like only $39 for Warhammer versus close to 60 for Baldur's Gate. Now, Baldur's Gate is totally worth the price, but I just can't afford it. Baldur's Gate was a game that I played on my own, so there wasn't really a need to get a legitimate copy. And Space Marine, of course, I played with my friends, so I actually bought them few copies. Like we pooled together money to get the three copies of the game. So at that point, like you have to get the legitimate version, right?
So does this mean that piracy is the single biggest reason that Sri Lankans are invested in the video game industry? Well, not exactly, but it may indicate that piracy is how video games first enter into the minds of Sri Lankans. The second point would be that people are invested in video games through piracy, not primarily due to financial reasons, but due to their awareness of the current video game industry as well.
If it's like a AAA game or whatever, I would feel less guilty of pirating a like a one and done campaign game if they still release this kind of games. That'd be pretty cool. But if it's an indie game, I'll tell you something. If I pirated an indie game, even though I would feel like the scum of the earth, let's just say let's hypothesize that I pirated an indie game and I played it and I had a really good time, I would go back and buy it. Honestly, not even kidding.
But piracy is not without its risk. For every pirate that may not be able to afford a game or wants to preserve a piece of video game history, there's a bad actor who's always looking to steal their data.
Well, it complete very much. It's different from bad actor to bad actor. It's a matter of, for example, inserting it into installation files, game files. It's probably, even it may look like a file that you may not think something, but let's say you're downloading, it comes as a zip file sometimes, right? So there's a lot of other files in it. So actually the process of you downloading it also would have just done the job, literally, because it's in your system and it starts working then. And we have stuff now, it's called zero-click vulnerabilities. You don't have to click on anything. The fact that the code is embedded there, it starts doing its work. You really don't have to do much. So there are situations, and sometimes it may look like a Word file, a README file, a text file, instructions or something, and you will open that, thinking maybe there's a further installation instructions or the crack key instructions or whatever. So actually that action is enough for the bad guy to trigger events in the backend to do certain stuff. So there's a variety of, we call it attack vectors, but there's a variety of ways you can get this done. But more or less in a nutshell, that is what it is. So I can't tell you there's a safe way of doing it. Certainly I know people who try to, but 99.99%, you're not going to get a good file or a good result at the end of this.
But how would a single PC in the middle of nowhere like Sri Lanka be valuable enough to gain the attention of a bad actor?
Generally, your data might be more important than you think. A couple of things. One is, it might be your data, your information, which they can sell for a couple of dollars. And it's not that they're specifically selling yours. They will compile a list and they will sell, and maybe that can be sold for like $500 on the dark web. And let's say that's 1 million names there. So you have to understand there's a compound effect there. Secondly, yeah, this PC in the middle of nowhere may seem inconspicuous to you, but for them, it's something they can use, let's say, in a DDoS attack, where suddenly your machine is also sort of enlisted as part of this attack with your processing power. All of that is used to send malicious commands and all that. And then all you notice is your machine becoming a little slow, whereas actually the bad guy is using your bandwidth and your processing power, your computing power to do some bad thing. And actually the danger is, if, for example, someone like me does the forensics, it comes back to you, and you may get in legal trouble there. Certain country jurisdictions, if they find that your machine was doing that, they may take legal action against you also. So that's the second risk. Thirdly is, like I mentioned, if you're working somewhere, maybe they're after that. So there are enough and more ways that the bad guys have targeted individuals because they know they worked somewhere.
But getting back to video game piracy, when I started looking into this, I had a hunch, but I couldn't actually prove it. So how do I actually prove it, right? I talked to a couple of my friends for this experiment, and you have to note that these are my friends. I had a hunch of what was going to happen, but I did not influence their answers in any way, shape or form. Let's get into it.
Game එකක් pirate කරලා දිනනවා නම් අත උස්සන්න. හරි. දැන් game එක pirate කරලා දිනවනේ. ඔයගොල්ලෝ 7 years GTA 7 years pirate කරලා දිනනවාද? pirate කරලා දිනනවා අත උස්සන්න. GTA 7 years pirate කරලා දිනනවා නම් අත උස්සන්න. හරි. දැන් අපි දන්නවා ලබන අවුරුද්දේ GTA 6 එනවා. GTA 6 එනවා. දැන් GTA 6 හැබැයි දැන් කියනවා ඩොලර් 100ක් විතර වෙයි කියලා. එනවද? එනවලු. ගන්නයි. දැන් කියනවා අවුරුද්දක් ගන්න කියනවා. දැන් ඒක ඩොලර් 100ක් වුණාට ඕගොල්ලන්ට සල්ලි තිබ්බා. ඕගොල්ලෝ GTA 6 purchase කරනවද නැද්ද? කරනවා. කරලා කට්ටිය දුස්සද? Thank you. හරි. දැන් ඕගොල්ලෝ GTA 6 purchase කරන්නේ ඕගොල්ලෝ GTA 7 years කලින් play pirate කරපු හින්දාද? නැත්නම් ඕගොල්ලෝ GTA 7 years ගාලා තිබ්බේ නැත්නම් ඕගොල්ලෝ GTA 6 purchase කරනවද නැද්ද? කලින් තිබ්බේ නෑ. කලින් ගාලා නැත්නම් දන්නේ නෑ. හරි එහෙනම් ඒකට agreement එකක් අවශ්‍යද? හරි ඒ කියන්නේ ඕගොල්ලෝ GTA 7 years කලින් ගාවේ නැත්නම් කලින් pirate කරේ නැත්නම් ඕගොල්ලෝ GTA 6 ගන්නේ නෑ.
So does piracy actually help the video game industry in Sri Lanka, at least in the long run? I would say so. But let me know what you think. What your thoughts on video games, piracy, or even Sri Lanka. But let's catch up in the next video. Adios.